Today's focus, starting with Sheng, nourishing life, extending life. This term Sheng, it implies somehow, maybe you're familiar with this kind of dietary trip that had been popular for some time, macrobiotics. Right? That's actually when George Russell created that term, he was actually translating Sheng. It's in some ways larger life, extended life, nourishing life, whatever. People often talk about it as longevity techniques, health maintenance. That's what this Yangshen, and it was a traditional subject in Chinese medicine thought, and yet in more recent treatments of Chinese medicine in the West, it didn't, even though we said, well, Chinese medicine emphasizes prevention and stuff, what you actually study is, let's do syndrome differentiation of a patient and then treat their disorder. And there wasn't so much emphasis on Yangshen until, the last few years, really. And then we started to see more interest and more translation of material in this and all. And yet it was historically an important part of Chinese medicine thought. And quite frankly, I have trouble distinguishing a lot of it from our topic yesterday of spirituality, because the overarching aspect of nourishing life is you have to have a sense of meaning and purpose for your life. That directs your Shen, and as we said yesterday, then you start to make better choices, and you're more motivated to do health practices. And even if you don't feel well, you tend to have the force of Shen, and as we said, Shen leads Qi, Qi leads blood, blood leads strength, and so if the Shen is directed, the Qi moves, goes past the obstructions, goes past the dysfunctions, the blood circulates. What we always say, blood is valued for flowing, not for stagnating. The blood circulates, the body will feel strength. So it begs the question then, if the person really has fatigue, what's modern medicine's definition of chronic fatigue? Fatigue that has lasted for at least 6 months and prevents the person from doing previously tolerated activities. Well, if your Shen is directed and it therefore guides the Qi, and the Qi is then able to go past these kinds of obstructions, you have to wonder, is it true that the person with chronic fatigue may actually have a lack many times of clear meaning and purpose, therefore, and we certainly encounter this a lot, right? People with chronic fatigue, they're in a difficult situation. They don't like their work. It's too stressful. It's not rewarding. They have an overtaxing home life where they don't feel they get the support that they need. And I always think of a favorite patient of mine with chronic fatigue, and her husband she actually had several relatively young kids, and her husband fancied himself as a mechanic, and so they had 5 or 6 cars, none of which ran very well. And so she was typically late for treatments because of car problems. And one day she came in tears, again quite late for her appointment, only to say, well, we broke down on the freeway again. And I said to her, why don't you just tell, and I had met her husband a number of times, he was a friendly enough fella, and I said, why don't you just say to him, look, we need one good, reliable car. I don't care what a mechanic you think you are, that you can buy these junkers. And it seems so obvious. She needed my sort of pressure to help make that step, right? And just making that change, she did that, made that change. She felt so much more supported. They're like, did I need to tonify her Qi anymore? Probably not. Suddenly her life flowed better.
Sorry.
Right? So you can see this aspect of if the Shen is disturbed, you don't feel supported. Right? So in that sense, Yangshen does have an overlap with spiritual concerns. Having said that, though, you have it in your packet now, this page, which is a compilation of, and it's actually from a modern text dealing with Yangshen. It's a compilation of various issues that are considered relevant to having this expanded, nurtured life. And it's grouped into two groups. The first group is just normal living, not things that should be special or difficult, just things that you should just do as a matter of course. And so you see the first one of these is to go by the laws of yin and yang. And what does that mean? To pay attention to natural cycles and rhythms. For example, we have a daily biorhythm, and that is relative to the movement of the sun. So if we behave in some kind of regulated way in a daily behavior, that's partly going by the laws of yin and yang. And so we see this, for example, in the Neijing, talks about, how by the seasons and that we should, get up earlier or in the summer and sleep later in the winter and all. That's part of this going by the laws of yin and yang. Now, in terms of, as I said, we have different rhythms. We have the daily rhythm created by the earth turning. So in regards to that, we should guide our daily activities, meaning that we should get up early. I think the principle here is that that our biorhythms are set, our behaviors are set by many generations before us. Chinese medicine believes that, in fact, we carry the Jing from 7 generations of ancestors. This is why, historically, you should, in China, always know where the graves are 7 generations back, because you're still receiving Jing from those dead ancestors, even though they're even dead, was the traditional. And by tending their graves, you've got a lot of influence coming in. So if you wanted to have optimum support from your ancestors, you needed to be able to go back 7 generations. We actually see this 7 generations thing somewhat cross-culturally. You see it in Native American traditions. They talk about how we should have behaviors. Wasn't it Chief Seattle who had that famous speech where he said we should make choices thinking how it will influence 7 generations in the future? So you see it in the Native American tradition. You see it in the Judeo-Christian thing. You haven't seen this in the Bible. The sins of the fathers visited upon the sons for 7 generations, hence this kind of fire and brimstone sort of talk. Well, so there is something about this. So if it's true that our Jing has 7 generations of influence, we can't suddenly decide we're going to make a radical change from the way our parents or grandparents lived. Of course, we can eat a somewhat better diet than our parents, but if our parents ate a high-protein diet, and our grandparents did, let's say you come from a Northern European ancestry, all of a sudden, you're going to do some health food regime that says, well, there's an African tribe that only eats 6 grams of protein a day and never gets cancer, so we all should do that. I always ask that person, oh, were your parents African tribesmen? It's usually some white guy, with a very pale skin and blonde hair, and he's talking about how African tribes people live on 6 grams. It's ridiculous, because, this is very easy to verify clinically. You look at who's doing well on particular health food regimes. You will see Northern European peoples tend to do much more poorly on limited protein diets than Southern European peoples. I mean, looking out at this audience, I can see that by and large, most of us have European ancestry. And so we can look at that. We can say, look, like, I'm Italian, grew up in a very traditional Italian family. I can eat these weird health food regimes that are mostly grain-based, but you get your Dutch friend to try that. It's not likely. You get your Scandinavian friend to try. It's not likely he will do as well, because that. I mean, there's these very interesting examples. Look at what's happened during World War II when in the Japanese prison camps, when they often put Chinese prisoners and Western prisoners together. The Chinese prisoners did better than the Western prisoners, eating that almost exclusively rice gruel diet. That was it. So when a person says, okay, I'm going to make a radical change, you can't do it so fast, and we want to do it right away. I'm going to do everything different than what, and in fact, our society is doing that. We're in the midst of a big, social experiment. We're changing everything, If we look at the way our grandparents lived, it's quite close in many ways to the way people lived 200 years ago or 300 years ago. I had a funny example of this. We were driving through Arizona one day, and I had my mom with me. My mom's now 87, maybe 88. But she's, we were driving through Arizona, and we stopped at one of these museums of like colonial history or something, or early history of when white people got into Arizona there. And they had this wall of implements that with numbers, and you had to try to guess what they were for. And they had the typical things, the apple peeler and this and that. And I'm very enthusiastic about history and do some historical reenacting. And also, I looked at that, and I could name about what half of them did. My kids were with me. They were teenagers at that time. They looked at them. They could name just a couple of the things they did. My mom comes in. She goes, "Oh, blah, 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 blah." She knew every one. She goes, "I've used all those things." Right? Now, this is like 250 years ago. My mom used them. That's how it was, right? But now we changed everything. We stay up later. We sleep later. We don't eat at regulated times. We've really radically changed our diet. We have totally different viewpoints about discipline of kids. All these things are in flux, but our body can't keep up because it takes 7 generations to sort of integrate those changes into the body. So this whole little digression to that is to say, when we talk about this daily biorhythm, it's a behavioral biorhythm. It's not innate. It's not in every animal. It's programmed in by generations of behavior. So we should get up early, as all agriculturalists do. They tend to get up early. And so Chinese medicine says, ideally, you should get up around 5 o'clock and do some kind of deep breathing and light exercise. The reason for that is you capitalize on the fact that the lung is active 3 to 5. And so you want to catch the end of that and take advantage of that to really cultivate your qi. In fact, this is what we see if you go live in a temple or a monastery or an ashram or something. This is when they like to do practices. They get up at it's supposed to be a spiritual place, and they get up at an ungodly hour, right? The reason being, that time you can capitalize on that biorhythm of the body. So you get up early. And then yesterday we talked about depression, and I gave that Chinese folk saying that you should get up every morning and clean your house. The best time to clean your house, there's a correspondence, macrocosm, microcosm to the inside the body. You clean your house during large intestine time. So you get up, and then you order your environment. That really harmonizes your qi. After doing things around your place and ordering an environment, that's when you have breakfast, when you've gone from large intestine to stomach time. Because now the organ of, and really you see, the stomach is active then. That's really the most important meal. People even in the West say it's breakfast. Sure, because the stomach qi is highest first thing in the morning. You eat breakfast, that should be the time you can really take in and assimilate that. Think about later. Dinner time, there is no organ of digestion active. And so if we say, oh, I'm going to make my biggest meal at dinner, that's counter to the biorhythm that's programmed into the body. Maybe 7 generations from now, people will have their stomach active in the evening. That's just, we're trying to start that program, but we've deviated from this previously programmed pattern. So, as I say, we get up, we have the cycle, and we're all familiar with it, 3 to 5 being lung, and that's the time to do qi practice. And then 5 to 7, that's the large intestine, and that's the time to do cleansing and ordering and cleaning of the environment. And then we have the stomach time, 7 to 9, that's the time to have breakfast. And then you have this interval of spleen and heart. This is considered the time, traditionally, so 9 to 11, 11 to 1, this is the time to do work. And notice the spleen being active 9 to 11, that work that requires intellectual concentration. The time you can study and remember best is during the spleen time. Right? So we're a little lucky in that way right now. You'll remember stuff from this part of the talk better than later on in the day. It's not just that you're tired, it's just that your body's physiology doesn't support it as much. This is the time when your concentration is supported by your innate biorhythm, right? And then comes small intestine, another good time to eat. So notice you have a stomach time and a small intestine time when taking in, as the small intestine separates pure and impure substances, particularly in terms of production of blood, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Small intestine is important for that. Then you have the bladder time, 3 to 5. No, you don't have to hold it until 3 to go. It's not. But actually, this is quite an interesting time, isn't it? Since organs 12 hours opposite are in that strong or weak relationship, during bladder time in the afternoon, the lung is actually at its lowest. Therefore, that's the issue of feeling tiredness in the afternoon is actually a sign of lung qi deficiency. Yeah, your qi dips because the lung is weak, and the lung being the master of qi, you're likely to experience that lag at that time. But in general, this interval is considered another good time for work. The bladder being the taiyan, the surface level, outward activity is seen as relevant at that time. But it shifts at 5 because now you move into the kidney time, and this turns to the inward. So the Shao Yin being very deep. So we go from an outward activity time in the afternoon to an inward activity time at 5. So starting somewhere around 5, you should change your behavior from outward concerns to more inward relaxation. And isn't it interesting that we do have, even in the West, with no knowledge of this, we've spontaneously sort of chosen this 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 sort of workday thing. And most people, at least a generation or two ago, around 6 o'clock, someone would typically go home and have dinner, right? But nowadays, we've tended to, especially if we're studying Chinese medicine, we do all these health practices, like have a lot of evening classes, which are totally out of balance, totally against the timing of when you remember well, and very draining to the kidney, because the kidney is nurtured by inward movement. And so if we then were to go home and relax, then we could replenish our kidney. Same thing in the wintertime. If we weren't as active in the winter, the kidney gets stronger. If we really raise our activity levels in the winter, you actually deplete the kidney because it benefits from that kind of inward movement of qi. So we have the kidney time, 5 to 7, and then it goes to pericardium. That's the time when you should have sex. 7 to 9 in the evening is the best time to have sex. Now, we had classes typically at Pacific College. Our classes would start around 6 and go 6 to 9. So I always made sure I gave a little extra break time because the students had to take care of this biorhythm thing. 7 to 9, you should be out there having sex. But because although we're calling this pericardium, it's really ministerial fire. That ministerial fire is what really provides for arousal in sexual function. And so that's the good time for that. Notice, by the way, the pericardium is strong from 7 to 9. The opposite to that, 7 to 9 in the morning, is the most common time for heart attacks. When the pericardium is weak. So it's not when the heart is weak that people get heart attacks. It's when the pericardium is weak that people get heart attacks. So that protective aspect of the pericardium, that more physicalized aspect of actual heart function is important for this. When blood stagnation really occurs in the heart, is when the pericardium is weak. We're going to talk about heart disorders later today, and we'll look at some treatment for that. Okay, then remember you're getting up 5, so you go to bed pretty early, and so you've had sex sometime between 7 and 9. Now, if you follow Sun Tzu Miao and you have 10 partners, it's a lot to crowd them in that interval, But
But then you can't do 2-hour blocks of time, so you just got to keep.
Right. Well, see, when you said, when somebody asked that question, 10, somebody else says 10 partners in a night really rebuilds your kidney. Doesn't it exhausting? Well, you're crowding all 10 partners into 2 hours, so it's not like you're like, this is spending so much time with each one. So many famous stories around this kind of stuff, and it's always, it's sort of funny, but like, one of the emperors had so many concubines, because at that time, the emperors would have all these concubines because that was a lot of part of political alliances, right? And so they would compete with each other because everybody wanted to become his favorite. All the concubines wanted to become the emperor's favorite. And so one of the emperors actually had a little goat-drawn cart that moved on tracks. It was like a little train, and it would go past all the concubines' rooms. And he would get in the little cart, and he would let the goat go, and whichever place it stopped in front of, that was the concubine he'd be with that night. So he let the goat choose for him who was going to be his sex partner. Well, one of the concubines got quite smart about this and actually started to put food for the goat out there, so it would always stop at her place. This is actually historically fact because she did become his favorite, and very. I don't know why you would trust the judgment of this to the goat. It's just a curious thing. Anyway, so we have that interval after 9. You have the triple warmer, you have the gallbladder, you have the liver. In any case, even if you're not getting up at 5, you have to sleep during the liver interval of 1 to 3. Because if you don't, the liver doesn't get to store blood sufficiently. So you may stay up later, especially now that we have electric lights and all that, stay up later than triple warmer and gallbladder time. But if it's and the worst thing of all is to stay up through the liver time, drink alcohol, and have orgasms. Then you really damage the liver.
That's college students.
Yes, that's college students.
They wind up with mononucleosis.
Yeah, right. Oh, it's a good point you say, because mononucleosis, these guys really are liver related. There's a lot of liver stagnation in those. And as we see, the liver stagnation gets high as the liver blood gets low. The liver chi can't spread when there's no blood so we say chi moves blood, but blood creates the environment for chi to move normally also. They're interrelated in this regard. So we often see erratic movement of chi when there's no blood. In one way it can go towards wind, right? In another way it can go, I tell you, we mentioned this yesterday, but I'll reinforce it. If you have chronically swollen lymph nodes, and of course with mono, lymph node swelling is a big part, when those lymph nodes get hard, it's often insufficient to try to disperse phlegm to break them down. You have to also tonify blood. And surprisingly, herbs that support liver blood, like gochidza and baishao and stuff, really help hard lymph nodes for that reason. The blood softens and allows that movement to occur again. So, and also we said yesterday, the liver blood supports the wei qi. So it's not just the lung that supports. The lung is more the qi level of wei qi support, but the liver blood supports the wei qi. If there's no liver blood, the wei qi collapses inward.
Another interesting thing about this cycle, at part time, if you read the very ancient text, it's a time to stop whatever you're doing and calibrate yourself to your destiny, to your highest dreams. So
Yes.
the Sheng stays active.
Yes, that's.
And that's a part of why people lose that. They don't stop. And that